In this video, we're going to add a tickets page where we can finally see all of our tickets. The page will call the API and display the tickets, allowing us to validate the work we have done in the past couple of videos. This video is part of a series dedicated to developing C# applications on Linux. Along the way, we are gaining a better knowledge of how Linux works, how to make our apps truly cross-platform. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel to stay informed of new episodes as they come out. And if you're looking for even more .NET, SQL, and other C# content, go to iamtimcorey.com. All right, let's come over to our web project, and in here under components and pages, we're going to create a new page called tickets.razor. Again, we're not using the template for this. Otherwise, we would do the Control-Shift-P and then do new file and then look for the web project and then come down here to Razor component. But we're just going to do it by hand. Again, doing these things by hand is actually a valuable exercise once in a while to make sure that you keep your skills sharp. So at page, and we're going to say tickets. And then we're going to change the render mode. So render mode, and this is going to be interactive server. Spell it right. And finally, we're going to inject the ticket API client, and we'll call it ticket API. Okay, so that gets us started. We can now set up a page title, and let's call this tickets. And let's go ahead and give ourselves a bit of room there. And then we'll say, let's put our H1 on the page and say tickets. And then let's create a simple paragraph here to say, this page shows all of this page allows us to see and modify all of the tickets. Something simple. Okay, nothing crazy here. Now what we're going to do is, before we go any further in here, I'm going to set up a code section. So this is going to set us up for success up above because we don't have anything yet to display. So we're going to say private list of ticket model. And we'll make that a nullable list called tickets. And you're yelling at me because I don't think you have the right using correct. So we need to add a using directive, which didn't add. I did control dot and I said add using, and it did not. So we can just say using, and it is tinyticket.web.models. Now, we can also make this easier by going to our import statement. And actually, let's just do that. Imports, come down here, put that there, save that, and now we don't need to have it here. Okay, so that kind of solves that problem. Okay, so now we can say, I don't know why you tabbed in there, private string, nullable string, error message. What this will be is and I can start off with an empty string here, or actually a null string, since it's nullable. But what it's going to be is, if we have an exception come back from the API, we'll make sure we just display it in some way. Don't just eat the exception. So I want to create a private async task called load tickets async. And this is going to be a try catch. So let's do try. And in the try catch, we'll say error message equals null to start. And then tickets equals await ticket API dot get tickets, plural, not singular, async. And then for our catch, we're going to catch our exception EX. If you don't know, You can catch different exceptions to have multiple catches, but we're just going to catch the one generic one. We'll catch every exception. So we can say error message equals string interpolation failed to load tickets, and then say why, ex.message. Now, this is something you need to think about when you're doing error messaging and showing to users is you got to look to see if this is going to expose any secret information. So if you're passing in the full error message, not just the dot message, but the full extent of the exception, then you could be passing in things like line numbers and code and the call stack, etc. You don't want to do that. And going through the API, it shouldn't do any of that stuff. But this is one of those things where often people don't really pay attention to that, and they might expose details all the way through because they just got sloppy in how they did exceptions. So we should be locked down pretty good, so it shouldn't be any problem to do this. I've checked all of our exceptions all the way up through, so it shouldn't be passing data all the way through through the API, especially once the API is deployed in production, because how it works in development is different than production. And we're running in dev right now. But just kind of keep an eye on that and make sure you test to make sure you're not exposing, inner secrets that you don't want to expose, and only doing that on an exception. Okay, so that's it for our for what we need to do, down here in the code section. One more thing we need to do because we've had the method, but I always forget to do this. Actually, call a method. Protected, override, async, task, on initialized async. We call await load tickets async. So yes, we could do this work right in here. And I debated it. But by naming it, we now know what this does. And so it's not just a random blob of code in the on-initialized async. We don't have to read the code to figure out what it's doing. This tells us what it's doing, and now it's more self-documenting and easier to understand. Besides the fact that we're going to be calling this later again. So if we ever want to refresh the page, reload the data, we're going to call load tickets async. So that also is another reason why we would do that. Okay, I can collapse this down now. We don't need to see it anymore. Now we can come up here and start working in our HTML and Blazor syntax. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to check to see if that error message is showing. So if error message is not null. And if it's not null, then we're going to say div class equals, we're using Bootstrap here, so alert danger. And the role we'll say equals alert. And then we're going to say error message, like so. Pretty standard error message at the top. This is just a red banner that says, hey, there's an error in your call. Okay, now let's show the actual data. We can hide this and have our full screen available. We're going to say if. Notice the symbol, that's because we're mixing C# into our HTML. So to say first, whenever do a C# command. So if tickets is null. Because there is a use case, or is a case where this list of tickets is null, and that's when it first starts before it loads. Say a load takes 5 seconds. Well, then we don't want to just show a blank page. We want to show something. So this is where we're going to say, let's put a paragraph tag here, and we'll put an emphasis here as well, and we'll say loading. Like so, because if it's null, then we're in theory loading. Because remember that it returns an empty array if it doesn't find any tickets. So that's where our else if comes in. Else if tickets.count equals 0. Now, we don't have to check to make sure tickets is not null because we've already checked that here. It won't get down here if tickets is null. Therefore, we don't have to do a null check. So here we can do the same kind of thing, and we'll actually just copy and paste this. And instead of loading, we can say no tickets found. Okay, so that's saying, hey, there's no tickets in the database, which is going to happen when you first start out, although we already have tickets, so we won't see that. Okay, now is where we get into like the big layout. And that's where we're going to do a table. And we'll say class equals table. And that's a bootstrap class. So it used to be, and I'm going back to my early days of web development, we used to use tables. We used to abuse tables by using them for layouts. And that's not okay. That's not the proper way of laying out items on a page. Now, tables are very flexible, and that's why we used to use them, or again, abuse them in order to get things to lay out. Tables are for data. And since we're putting data on the page, this is the appropriate use for a table. Okay, T-head. And then in here we can do TR and then TH and say we're going to do the ID. We're going to kind of do a controlled. I thought there's a way to duplicate lines. I forget what it is, but not a problem. I'll just copy and paste. I'm fairly certain there's a way to do it. I'm just blanking on how to do it. I think we need 6. So title, description, and then priority. And then we have 2 more, created and completed. So these last 2 are dates. Okay, so that's our header. Now we can put our body in. So T body. And in here, we're going to do a @ for each. And we'll say for each var, for each, let's go with ticket model, ticket in tickets. How about that? And then we will say TR for a row, and then TD. And I am going to say @ticket.id. And then again, I'm going to copy and paste this. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this will be ticket title. And this will be ticket description. And this will be priority. And this will be date created. But it might be null, but if it's not null, so I'm going to put a question mark first. If it's not null, then put to short date string. This is optional. You can format it in different ways. I'm going to format it to a short date string, which just puts a date on it. Now, for a ticket system, you might want to have a date and time because you want more precision on that. And that's totally fine. But for me, I'm just going to put a short date string, and we'll call it good. And the last one is date completed. And again, if it's not null, then to short date string, like so. Oops, no semicolon. Okay, so this right here is important because both of these are nullable. If it's null, it's not going to do anything. It's going to leave it blank. But if it isn't null, then we're going to format it for a short date string. Okay, so that should be everything we need on this page. So let's save this. Let's come back over here. Remember before I talked about in layout nav menu, we're going to change counter. So we're going to say tickets. Do we call it tickets or ticket? We should call it tickets. We did. Good for us. And then we won't worry about the icon, but over here we'll say tickets. We could change the icon here, the by plus square fill thing, but I'm not going to bother to leave it as is. Now we should be able to come over here to our run and run this and see our list of tickets if it's working properly. And if it's not, we'll see it broken. Okay, so and this is again where calling the HTTP client was so helpful because we don't have to do anything on the front end. We can just say, hey, go get the tickets. Okay, so tickets. Wait for it. Oh, you know what? I haven't started my database, I bet. It's going to time out. Cool. Let's come back over here. Let's go to SQL Server. Starting container. Yep. Yeah, it timed out. So if we go back to here, there we go. So there we go. So I have 4 tickets, and the last one was completed on 5/15, but the other 3 are not. So we now have a list of all of our tickets on the page. Now, we can't do anything yet. We can't add tickets. We can't modify tickets. We can't complete tickets. We can't delete tickets. We're going to get to that in the future videos. But for now, we actually have a working application that's going all the way out to our database through our API and back using like multiple different projects. We can actually see that, yes, we have exceptions. That's a we had the problem because the database was not working, and there's the whole exception. If you want to look at the console, we can see all the problems that happened. But then since then, we have all of our executions working. They should work. So this is our working application right now with our tickets. So next up, what we'll do is I think we'll probably end up creating tickets next. That's probably the next logical step before we start working on modifying and deleting tickets. All right, so that's coming up next. Until then, the source code is down in the description. Thanks for watching. As always, I am Tim Corey.